Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Harihi Om. Good afternoon from USA. Welcome to Kaivalya Yoga Gurukulam for the second class on the Om. Thank you for joining. Today, I'm hoping to review what we heard yesterday in the form of these videos, and a lot of Sanskrit terms were thrown around, and we went through the four states of consciousness. And so I just want to make sure that the idea of the concept of Om is firmly established in our hearts and minds. So when we begin to practice it, there is no doubt. So when you close your eyes tomorrow morning, for instance, and then you begin to say the Om, I don't want that any doubt, and what was the name again, or what was the state again, and so on. The energy and the practice and the secret of Om, if you will. I'm going to keep an eye on the time. I forgot to get my wristwatch. I've kept 1 hour as an outer limit. So we'll see how it goes, how the energy flows. So anywhere between 45 minutes to 1 hour, whatever it is, however the divine guides us. So I just want to make sure you schedule this time if you are listening to it live. The power and the energy of Om is really beyond comprehension. Om is not just a sound. It's very explained about how just simply humming a lullaby can put a crying baby to sleep, brings peace. Even for an atheist or an agnostic, if you will, if they listen to this gentle hum, it brings a calmness to the mind, right? So that is the least of all benefits that you can have as far as Om is concerned. Thanks. The least of all benefits is it brings you, it makes your mind calm and you get peace. That is the least. But then progressively, as you practice it as a sadhana, as meditation itself, meditation on the sound itself, as yoga, then it takes you to the highest possible state of consciousness. That is the energy of this Om. My beloved Sadguru, Bhagavan Sri Satya Sai Baba, didn't speak much or deliver much on Om. He has spoken about the meaning of Om, but not necessarily given any scholarly discourses and discussions. But he straightaway inculcated a practice that is still in the ashram, and it's been going for decades now. And what is the practice? The first thing in the morning, every dawn breaks with the sound of hundreds of people chanting Om 21 times. How beautiful would that be? That is how I grew it. That is the atmosphere I grew, and all my colleagues who studied with me grew. And then when we moved to the dorm, that was the practice. That is still the practice of all the institutions that are run under the Satya Sai organization. The idea is you begin the day with the Oms, 21 Oms. And before I forget, Om is generally suggested, practiced. This is more of a tradition. in 7 and multiples of 7. So if you chant Om, you could do 3, of course. 3 is a standard, a shortened version, if you will. Like in the Gayatri mantra, that's a prayer for enlightenment. You do Om Bhur Bhuvaswaha, 3. But then you have the 7 words. So in the lengthened version of the Gayatri, you have Om Bhuhu, Om Bhuvaha, Om Suvaha, Om Mahaha, Om Janaha, Om Tapaha, Om Satyam. So you have 7 words that you tune into when you chant the Gayatri. And then you say that this energy from beyond come to me. So that is the lengthened version is 7. The shortened version is 3. And that's kind of a standard practice. So it is the same thing with Om as well. So when you do Om before bhajans, Om before a ceremony of some kind or group meditations, before you begin to discuss some spiritual topics, let's say a study circle or a book reading club or a satsang, if you will, then 3 Oms are generally done. Because when you go into 7 Oms, it goes into meditation. So when you're going into deep meditation practice as a group or especially as an individual, then a minimum of 7 times is recommended. I practice a minimum of 7, but I love to do it 7 into 3, 21. We will see if we'll come back to that in a little bit. 7 times 3. Or maybe we can just do it right now since I'm on that topic. Like I said, these things, I just allow my inner voice to guide me. So bear with me if I pause and there's a lot of and this is how it's going to be. So the 7 times represents the 7 dimensions of consciousness, 7th being the highest. Now, it also represents these dimensions of consciousness. Where are they? They are within our body. Everything that we talk of when we represent Vedanta, the thought of Vedanta, the Vedanta school of thought, if you will, the Sanatana Dharma, the ancient civilizations in the Indian subcontinent region practiced thousands of years ago, of which Hinduism is a part of. When they refer to the cosmos and to the universe and to the galaxies and they refer to the planets and all of that, they do it consciously, fully aware that all of these are represented in this microscopic body. So one has to understand that when we study the external cosmos, it's actually studying the internal body. When we talk of 7 dimensions, when we talk of the 7 dimensions above and the 7 dimensions below, we talk of in other words, the lokas, the 14 lokas, if you will. Lokas are worlds. Worlds, in other words, are dimensions of consciousness. This is one dimension where you and I are awake, when you are conscious, and we experience a shared reality, and within that we create our own reality and so on. So this is one loka. And there are 7 such lokas above and 7 such lokas below the earth plane. In other words, below this consciousness, this dimension, this physical plane that we call the earth plane. You have 7 dimensions above, 7 dimensions below. The Om takes you from the earth plane to 7 dimensions above. Now all of these dimensions, though we tend to think of it or imagine or visualize it as something outside, like the astral plane and the causal plane and somehow beyond the universe, beyond time and space and all of that, which is also true. But more importantly, these are meditated upon as the 7 centers of consciousness in the spinal cord. Spinal cord is used as a reference. So this is not a lecture on chakras. We will come to that. But just to give you an idea that the spinal cord is used as a reference to understand the different centers of consciousness, different parts of the spine, and the 7 centers of consciousness. So when you practice the Om, you practice each Om representing each center of consciousness, the 7th being the highest. Let's hold this thought now. We come back to this when we practice when we will practice together at least 7 rounds if the time permits. And I'm sure it will, because I'm trying to come back to the practice session so we know exactly how to chant, how long to chant, and how do we meditate and so on. It's more of a review of what we talked yesterday. So let's hold on to that thought of 7 dimensions going above. In the meantime, let's revisit the concept of Om and once again get our concepts very, very clear. Okay, so now let me switch to my writing pad. Voila. Okay, I managed that. All right. I hope you can hear me, and I think you can. So let's draw the Om. I have the blue pen here. Okay. A small one, a slightly bigger one, or equivalent, it really doesn't matter. The tail, the crescent, and the bindu. Since I like the bindu so much, I'm going to give it a little bit of an extra touch to it. All right. So this is the Om that I drew on the sands in that holy temple of Dakshinamurti. This base, this bottom here, this part is what represents the awakened state. So let's put awake. This part here. Right? So this forms the A of Om. What is A? A equals a kara. I'm not used to writing on this surface, so bear with me. Akara, akara. Kara means the one that makes the sound Om. A is the syllable that gives you the sound, akara. This. The Sanskrit word for this is Jagrat Avastha. Awake means Jagrat. J A G R U T. Jagrat. Jagrata, Jagrata Avastha. Now it is this Avastha, it is this Avastha where you and I spend most of our learning, contemplating, and debating, analyzing, and all of this, right? So what is, this is a very important Avastha. This is where it's a make or break situation. This is where we create our delusions. This is where we begin to break free from delusions. This is where the I resides in its fullest glory. The I, whether it's a deluded I, the supreme I is of course there in all its glory, but the deluded I, or the I, that ego, if you will, the false sense of ego, we call it the pond. If you haven't attended my satsangs, there is the I, that is the pond. Let me go back to that. Let me go back to the drawing board here. The I, there is one I here, the small I, which is the pond. Then there is a slightly bigger I, that is the river. Then there is the beautiful I, that is the wave. Then there is the big I, I'm just increasing the size at this point, which becomes the ocean. And there's the supreme consciousness, the one and only, which is the cosmos. You can also understand it as ether, because from here is where ocean comes in. From ether, the ocean comes. From ocean, the wave comes. From wave, the river doesn't come from the ocean. Let me correct that a little bit here. Let me put it this way, actually. the pond overflows into the river. Oops. The river flows into the ocean. First, it becomes a wave, because when the river merges into the ocean, a lot of waves are created. Then the wave becomes part of the ocean. The ocean evaporates into ether to come back again as rain, which goes back into the pond. That is the cycle, if you will, of the I. It is the same I. It is the same supreme I. The I is not changed. This is a fundamental understanding that we have to have, that let me go back to that. The bindu that is here, this bindu here, the supreme I, this bindu is what we are talking here. This is the cosmos. This is the supreme I, the Parama Purusha. This is only an analogy, okay? Don't take it literally. It just gives you an idea to understand what is this all about. So, this same I comes here in the Jagrat Avastha. The same bindu that you see on top is what comes down in the Jagrat Avastha. So you and I, right now at this point, we may be, the I in us may be associating itself with the pond. But that I is not different from the I of Brahman, the big I, the cosmic I, the one and only I, the Kaivalya I, if you will. So one has to understand that very clearly. Why? Because this forms the basis of our spiritual practice. When we think, I want to get there, I want to be there, I want to become God at some day, I want to be liberated, or I want to be enlightened, we got to realize that the I in me is actually the big I. And the day we begin to understand that, enlightenment, the doors of enlightenment are already open. Enlightenment is not a goal, it is not a static state of achievement. It's definitely not absolute in any terms. It's not like, oh, I'm done, I'm enlightened, now I can relax and enjoy life. It doesn't work that way. Enlightenment is not like, oh, I attained enlightenment, I've tasted enlightenment, now let me go teach the world. Enlightenment inspires you to do huge things, because in that enlightened state of awareness, you begin to experience a bigger I in you that knows the little pond can dry up, correct? So this little body can die, will die. So the Sundar is there today, Sundar won't be there tomorrow. So that will go away. But the I becomes the river. If I as Sundar can understand that this I in me is actually the river that goes from one life to the other, and that merges into the ocean as a wave initially, where you begin to understand, I'm part of this huge consciousness. I'm a part of this ocean of consciousness. And then finally you realize, I am the ocean. And then you realize the ocean itself emerged from me. The Parama Purusha, the Ishvara, as Baba would call it. Even beyond Purusha, he says there's Ishvara. Now at this point, these are only concepts as far as I'm concerned. So, but it's good to meditate upon them, to contemplate upon them. Not analyze too much, but then just take your mind there, and the mind stops thinking. It can't think anymore. Let go. So Om is that sound that helps your mind to actually open itself. Let's come back. So before we go back to the drawing, this Jagrat Avastha that we are talking about, where you and I essentially, for most part, think of ourselves as the pond. This is where we create reality. Our reality. We have individual reality, we have a shared reality. And then we take that shared reality and pass it to our children. At the moment they are born, we try to educate them, when to laugh, when to cry, all of that, right? You see how we just pass our reality to them, and so they build their reality borrowed from us. And therefore all of us have created this reality around us. And we begin to believe this is the objective reality. but this is a reality created by our minds. And since we have bequeathed, if you will, from one to the other, the reality that I have borrowed, I pass it to my child, the child passes it to his child. That's taught in schools, everywhere around, the same reality is taught. This is black, this is white, 2 plus 2 is 4. And then your mind begins to get confined to this state. So then what happens? Then when we talk of higher dimensions, 7th dimension of consciousness, 4th dimension of consciousness, we try to understand that from this state, from this confined learning, from this conditioned learning. We try to grasp what that could be. We try to fit that elephant into this bottle. And that becomes a problem. What does that mean? It means we try to understand the God principle in us through the mind, through the senses. And then we compare spirituality with science. Sometimes I do compare them, but I think they're completely different. Spirituality refers to a dimension beyond the senses. Beyond the senses, science doesn't even exist. Science doesn't even recognize an existence or a consciousness beyond the senses. Does consciousness give rise to a brain, or does brain give rise to consciousness? It's a $1 million question, correct? Science is debating and understanding, because once you understand consciousness gives rise to the brain and all the functions of the brain, not the vice versa, because you can go brain dead, then what happens? Does consciousness go away? And I'm talking of the term spiritual consciousness here. Someday we'll define it a little more in detail as we get to study this. Consciousness to me at this point is that I that I'm talking of, the I. What is this I? Am I the pond? Then that is my consciousness. I am Sundar. I have this body, I have this brain, I have this mind. I was born in India, I am now in the US. This is the I. This is my consciousness at this point. But when I begin to understand the bigger I, the consciousness begins to expand. So ultimately that consciousness is everything is I. So that is how I think of consciousness. So what happens is, science doesn't understand beyond the senses. Our modern education doesn't teach us things beyond the senses. Churches, religion, institutions were established to teach us beyond the senses, but they have become more dogmatic, more indoctrinating in their nature. So what happens there is the freedom of that spirit is again curtailed to some extent. So what we do therefore in all of this learning that we have gathered, we try to take this supreme consciousness and try to bring it into our mind. Try to understand it through our mind. Try to think through this. Oh, if I do this, where am I going to go, and all of that. All that can be done. I'm not saying it's wrong, but understand that all of the debating, all of that understanding, all of that analyzing cannot go beyond a particular point. There is a difference between knowledge and wisdom as far as I'm concerned. Knowledge is knowing. When you analyze and try to understand from these kind of talks and discussions and learning, we listen and we say, okay, this is what it is. Oh, now I know what it means. Now I know what the AUM means. That is knowing knowledge. When you begin to practice that knowing, begin to bring it into your practice, slowly a greater awareness opens up. A greater awareness opens up, which is very difficult for you to express in the form of words. Because words again comes down to, is again limited by the language you speak and so on. And therefore what happens, when you begin to limit that, find it difficult in expressing these words, then we begin to compromise on the wisdom. Wisdom is born out of practice. When you take the knowledge and put it into practice, the nididhyasana that we talked about yesterday, then wisdom is born. So we spoke about 3 things yesterday, okay? We spoke about, pardon me if I'm going to be writing red, green, I don't know, let's see. I'm getting used to this. I'm new to this this board. Shravana, Shravana, Shravana is listening or listen. You first listen, right? This is the first step. Happens in this Jagrut Avastha. The second is Manana. We spoke about this yesterday and I just want to make sure we review this. Manana. Contemplate. Contemplate on what you listened. Analyze it. All this also happens in the Jagrut Avastha. Some of this analysis, some of this deeper understanding can come in this state, and we'll come to this in a little bit. Okay? It can also come here. It can also come here. And the third one is Nidhi Dhyasana. Nidhi, DDHI. Nidhi Dhyasana. Let's call this assimilation. This is how Vedanta is taught. This is how you expected to understand Vedanta. Shravana, you listen. Mana is mind, right? Mana is mind. Manana is contemplating, churning. You churn it in your mind. And then Nididhyasana. Manana is a very interesting concept. Manana is not, I use the word contemplation. Manana, contemplation is an important word here. That gets closest to manana, not thinking, not over analyzing, contemplation. And within that, so you contemplate on this idea. So debating, analyzing, questioning, all that is also part of it. But it is more from the contemplating of this. There is a kind of a poetry in that contemplation. You sit back and analyze the meaning of the word or the concept from a wider picture. Then taking it into a laboratory and saying, but this can't work because it doesn't work with this senses, I can't see it and therefore it cannot exist. That kind of a thing doesn't work in manana. Manana is more of contemplating. Wait a minute, is there a deeper meaning to this? Am I seeing it from a different perspective? Can I see it from a completely another perspective? What is this perspective that this author from this book is sharing with me, or this Vedantic teaching is sharing with me? Let me try and put myself in their shoes and think from their point of view. That kind of a thing is manana, contemplation. And then you come back and decide whether you accept it or not. Nididhyasana, the third one here, the Nididhyasana, this part. Nididhyasana. This is the most important part. Without the assimilation, it stays as pure knowledge. Without Nididhyasana, without assimilation, wisdom is not born. It stays as knowledge. And that is why I used it cautiously, not in terms of judging anything. I use the word scholarly. Then you remain a scholar when you do the first two steps, Shravana and Manana. Oh yeah, I can debate very well. I can tell you which source this has come from, which Upanishads talks what and how it is all. We read a lot of this and they are good for those who find joy in doing that. And there is no one single way to do this. But for me, and this is all I say is just one blind man's perspective, right? For you to consider. That becomes a scholarly, it stops just being a scholar. That is the idea I got from Baba's teaching. Unless you begin to transform that into your everyday life, begin to assimilate it and practice it, then it only becomes a knowledge. It does not yield anything. So then you read to another. The reason why we have so many books is then you read one, you understand it, you try to contemplate and all of that. But when you don't practice what you learned, after a while, it kind of fades into the background, and then you go for another book, another teacher, another school of thought, and say, oh yeah, this sounds much better. And then you carry with that for some time, and then you go to another teacher. This is what happened and happens in India for thousands of years. The Vedas are a common platform, but then look at how many schools, how many perspectives, how many have developed. Not that they are wrong, but it just means that you tend to jump now from one school to the other, from one teacher to another, and just go on and on and on, trying to grasp at straws. But none of that will help, no matter how long you do it, 3 years, 10 years, 30 years, 50 years, if you don't assimilate it and begin to practice. Because when you begin to practice, you can go back to that contemplation and see if it is really working or not. And when I say practice, it is not this 1 week practice and 1 day practice and 2 days practice. You practice it for at least any practice, whether it is a chant, whether it is meditation, whether it is taking an idea and contemplating upon it. Take it for a period of time. The way I do it is I take 48 days to allow a concept to develop and bury itself into my subconscious mind. I begin to practice that concept, understand that concept every day, whatever my level of understanding, I begin to practice it. And then slowly the going back and forth happens in that 48 days. And in 48 days, in a mandala, I begin to get a clearer idea of this concept. And that stays with me, or it goes away to become something else. Without that practical component, it stays and becomes purely knowledge. All right, let's go back to the drawing board. So the Jagrat Avastha, then this one is, I think I'm on blue. Okay, I'm on, let me take the blue. So here, this state here is dream, D-R-E-A-M. Dream. In Sanskrit, it is called Swapna. S-U-A-P-N. Swapna. This is the U. U equals Ukara, the one that makes the sound U. A and U. Swapna Avastha, the dream state. It's interesting. When we hear something, you hear it in the conscious state, for most part. Sometimes you hear something from your deep unconscious, subconscious. You hear messages from other dimensions. We're all reflections of your own centers of consciousness, which opens up and connects to other dimensions. You listen there as well. That's why you wake up and say, I had this beautiful dream. This was the message I got in the dream. What was that message? Right? So you listen to that message. And then you contemplate on that message in your awakened state. So this Shravana and Manana happens for most part in the awakened state, but some of that goes into the dream state as well. It works the other way around. What you listen now in conscious state and you contemplate on the conscious state, you practice a meditation and you bring your practices, spiritual practices of chanting of the Om, etc. Then when you go to sleep, they begin to reveal a different meaning to you that you would have not got when you were awake and consciously trying to understand. So the mind mixes, matches from what you learned consciously and from your previous learning, from previous lifetimes, from your deep unconscious. Unknowingly in this assimilation, in this manana, in this contemplation, which kind of is a kind of meditation by itself, what happens is you touch upon different dimensions of consciousness without being aware of it. And those knowledge seeps in, but may not necessarily make sense to you in the conscious state. When you dream, it comes back to you. And so, Shravana and Manana, you listen to it conscious state, you might get a newer contemplative idea in your dream state. You listen to something in your dream state, you come back to conscious state and you begin. So the Akara and the Ukara is that beautiful dance of the awakened and the dream state. When I say dream, for most part, it is when you are going to bed and there's REM, the REM state, where your rapid eye movement, you're dreaming, and then you slip into a deep state. So that is how we understand as dream state, which is for most part true. But sometimes in your meditation, you cross through all these three states and then travel beyond, sometimes. So in sometimes when you go into deep contemplation, you slip into this state where everything becomes as real as a dream, and then you experience. These are called experiences in meditation. And you come out of it and say, wow, I had this vision, I saw this blue light, or I got this vision, I saw Baba, or I saw God, I saw something. All of these are that kind of state. It's nothing to do with the high state. It's like a dream state you're tapping through the awakened state in meditation while you're sitting, not necessarily lying down and going to sleep. That is what happens here. So, Akara and Ukara are these two states in the Om. The third one is the M. The M. The Makara. Let me write that down. Let me use a different color here. M. Makara. 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 Is the sound of bijaksharas, when mantras end in that represents this bindu here. That represents the bindu. Mantras ending in represents the bindu right here. So the makara ends here. Gives you an idea of the bindu. Though in this particular Om, Akara, the Makara ends or represents the state. I'll tell you what is the link between these two in a second. So just bear with me. Let me write this down. So here you have M-A-K-A-R-A, Makara, which is sleep. Deep sleep is also another way to refer to this. We use the term deep sleep only because it is different from the dream state. So Akara, Ukara and Makara. You notice that there is this twilight zone. We speak about the twilight zone in Hanuman Chalisa yesterday, for those of you who attended it. Nevertheless, this is that twilight zone. This is the dawn and the dusk. This is where we tend to go into. From here we go into dream state, or we are so tired that we fall asleep and go into the deep sleep state. This is the dawn and the dusk. This point here. Now, why is Makara here? And Makara also refers to the bindu. Look at the body language of the Om. Which part of these three, the Akara, the Ukara, and the Makara, which of these are closest to the crescent? The Makara is the closest. The distance between this is closer than the distance between this and the distance between this. This is more wavy, so here also there is a chance for the Swapna to get a little closer to the Turiya Avastha. The body language of the Om is very important, because Sanskrit is not a language derived by intellectuals. It's a divine language, one of the earliest languages that human beings have known. Tamil precedes that. But nevertheless, let's leave all those kind of debates aside. But the Om is common, whether it is Tamil or Sanskrit. The Om comes from that supreme idea that how it represents the whole universe, not as we see it in this dimension, but like I said, in all the 7 dimensions. So the body language of the Om is very crucial. Even in Tamil, there's a very beautiful way they write the Om, which represents the entire human frame from the brain to the bottom of the spine. But anyway, the point here is Makara is the closest, deep sleep is the closest that you can get to your God state. Why? Because in deep sleep, the I does not exist. You do not know you are fast asleep. If you know you are fast asleep, this is what the knowing and wisdom think about it. If you know that you are fast asleep, you are not there. Knowing doesn't take you there. When you lose yourself in the sleep, when you become one with that sleep, the I disappears. At that moment, in the experience, you are not there. The I is not there. When you wake up, you infer that because I was not awake, because I was not dreaming, I must have been fast asleep. That is one way. Secondly, the freshness that you have once you are awakened. That experience gives you the 100% proof that, oh my God, I slept like a log. I didn't know what hit me. I am so fresh. Freshness comes from that deep sleep, right? You infer it from the experience. That's why experience is so very important. How do you know you slept well? Because of your experience. Nobody else can understand how deeply you slept, how well you slept. Only you understand how you slept, right? So this deep sleep, where the I does not exist, is closest to the crescent, closest to the state of meditation. So therefore, when you end the Om, focus on the focus on the sound that takes you there. I wanted to make sure that this understanding of the Om is very clear to you all. If necessary, please revisit this. I know this is, like I told you, these are slow paced classes because I want to make sure that I say the right thing, not rush through, so that you follow what I'm saying. See this drawing here, come back to it. I know it's a little messy, but I hope I can improve on this as we go along. So think of these three states of consciousness. The fourth state here, let me write that down, is the Turiya. 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 Superconscious state. Superconscious state. Turiya. And the fifth state doesn't have a name. I'll call it nameless, but it is called Turiya Atita. Let me put that down in Sanskrit. Turiya. What did I do? Let me see 1 second. Okay. Turiya. Oh, I keep minimizing it. Okay. Turiya Atita. This is what it's called. Turiya Atita. Turiya Atita. Turiya Atita. The state that is beyond Turiya. That is what this means. State that is beyond Turiya. How many states of consciousness, if you will, there are 5 states of consciousness. The awakened state, Jagrita. The deep sleep state, Swapna. The third state is the deep sleep state. The Swapna is a dream state. Deep sleep state is the third state. Meditative superconscious state is Turiya. And Turiya Atita, the fifth state, that is beyond Turiya. Beyond Turiya. So you have these 5 states of consciousness. Turiya Atita as a state of consciousness is mentioned, like I said, in Siddha Siddhanta by sage Gorakshanata. I was divinely inspired to come across the name of this stage, so this sage, and it was amazing how that happened. This happened in Kedarnath, up in the Himalayas. And therefore I began to look for it, and I found one book that talked about it. I read about him, and I find it very fascinating as to how he explains his idea of cosmology to us. And let's see if we can share that as we go along in this Kaivalya Marga, enhance our understanding and see what were the perspectives of these yogis that they shared as in this journey. So basically, if you want a theoretical understanding of the Om, then this is it. This is all that you need to know at this point. The 5 states of consciousness, Akara, Ukara and Makara, are the 3 sounds that form the Om. The gap between 2 Oms becomes the 4th state here. This is silence. So, the 7 centers of consciousness, when we talk about chanting the Om, learning to chant the Om is very simple. And then you inhale. When you practice the chanting of the Om, and I'll come to 7 centers, when you practice the chanting of the Om, make sure at the end of the Om, you are still exhaling in silence. The Om merges into silence and you continue to exhale a little bit more, and then you inhale. Don't run out of breath like we do in the yoga class is different. The Omkara Kriya is different. That's the whole purpose of that is different. But in meditation, when you practice Om as meditation, you chant the Om, and about 10% of your breath is left. So you just stay in that. You don't want to disturb it by turning the inhalation. Stay there and naturally begin to inhale and awaken. There's a beauty that comes with practice. Be patient when you practice. So let me show you again. I can only show you perhaps visually. Inhale. Inhale. It comes with practice. So the end of the Om, you just want to be there. It could lead to a very tiny little suspension of breath also. And then you inhale. Before you inhale, the exhalation finishes. There is a little 10% left. At the end of it, a fragment of time, a fraction of maybe 2-3 seconds, there is suspension. And then you inhale again. In that inhalation, you feel the arising of consciousness. You take the Om to the next center of consciousness. I begin Om at the first base of the spine, the first center of consciousness, the first Om. The second Om is slightly above the Mooladhara, We will study the centers of consciousness as we go along. Slightly above the base of the spine, between the anus and the genitals, lies the first center of consciousness. Around the region of the sexual organs lies the second center of consciousness. So the next inhalation, you take your center to rest in the next one, center of consciousness. And there again you chant the Om. In each center of consciousness, this is for your manana, for your homework in this class, and for the weekend perhaps. In each center of consciousness, there is an awakened state, there is a dream state, there is a deep sleep state, there is the Turiya Avastha in each center of consciousness. So what we experience, all of this, oh, I experienced ecstasy, I experienced a high sense, a beautiful vision, all that is in the Mooladhara, in the awakened state. It could also be in the fourth state. It could also be in, so think about it, meditate upon that. Don't expect me to spell this out for you, because I think that destroys the learning. I want you to learn this, practice it and learn it. This is how, I'm not trying to be, and I'm not trying to encrypt any of this, but there was a devotee of Baba who would come, who's one of my most amazing gurus, and I think he was a Siddha Purusha, and I believe a lot of these yogis came to Baba. Very simple man, you wouldn't even give him a second look. A simple dhoti, a white kurta, a half kurta. He said he was from Payani, a divine town in South India, and he was very humble. When I noticed him sitting steady like a rock, looking at Baba when Baba would come out for darshan, I knew that I had to ask him how he's able to sit so steady, where everybody else was trying to give letters to Baba and touch his feet. He would sit at the back, just observe him in silence. Sense of peace in his eyes was amazing. But otherwise, he was just like anybody else. And at first, he refused to talk to me, or he just kind of brushed me aside. Then he said, I will teach you. Come, and where do you practice yoga? And I said, I practice up in the hills. Those days I would run up to the hills, where right now I believe that is a place for the archive, where the archive museum is kept. I'm not 100% sure, because I haven't been to Puttaparthi in a while now. But that is a place I used to go. There's a cluster of rocks where I would put my mat and practice my yoga, my favorite spot. And so he would meet me there. But he would just give me like these pointers to think and disappear for weeks on end. And I would have to sit and meditate and contemplate and learn. But that learning is really amazing. And that I'm hoping that's what happens to you. So in each state, in each center of consciousness, there are many levels in each of these. So the second Om is at the second center. The third Om is in the navel center. The fourth Om is in the heart center. The fifth Om is in the throat center. The sixth Om is the third eye center. The seventh Om is at the top of your head, the Sahasrara. So you have 7 centers: base of the spine, region of the sexual organs, navel center, heart center, throat center, third eye, top of the head. Try and chant 7 Oms at least, and multiples of 7. Then go back and start again. And practice again and again and again and again. What happens, the beauty of this practice, we did this for years in Puttaparthi. The beauty was the knowledge of these dimensions begin to reveal themselves to you. That is what we call as grace, as anugraha from the divine. Your consciousness begins to expand. Om has that power, the chant, the mantra itself has that power. You give life to the mantra when you chant it, and it awakens, it will do the magic for you. So don't try to overanalyze it while chanting. Pay attention to the sound. Think about all of this that we said, all this clutter that you see. You think about it when you're walking, talking, whatever, when you're awake. When you sit down to chant the Om, put all this aside and say, okay, now I've understood that. Let me begin to practice, and simply listen to the sound and see what that sound reveals to you. This is where we invoke this divine Guru, the Dakshinamurti, the divine teacher, the universal teacher. You are invoking this divine teacher. So he begins to reveal the secrets of your higher self to you. I cannot do this. Nobody else can do this for you. You have to open that channel, direct channel with the divine. And when you open that channel, it's not easy. I'm saying it's not easy because we, in this awakened state, what are we doing? We're constantly reiterating the borrowed reality, right? Reinforcing it again and again and again. That's how it is, and that's okay. But Om gives you that shortcut. Om cleanses the prana, cleanses the nadis. Om takes your consciousness up. Continuous practice of the Oms. And so Baba said 21 Oms every morning is the ideal way. If you can find time, practice the 21 Oms at the end of a yoga session or at the beginning of a yoga session, however you want to do it, how it suits you. Every day perhaps, if you have the time. But don't rush these Oms. Each Om is meditative in itself. You can even do just 7 of them to begin with. Each center. At first it will make no sense. At first it might sound like, oh my God, this is dry. What is the centers of I can't even relate to them and all of that. Be patient. That's why I said patience, perseverance in your practice. That is so important. And this reverential attitude, this prayer, this will guide you. So I want to end this with a short 5-minute video of that temple. Since we were at that temple, I want to end this with that temple. I went around the temple, so just to give you an idea what that temple is. So let's end this class with that. I want to urge you all to practice the Oms. Maybe we can revisit this Om. I have some slides in which how we chant the Om at the Gurukulam every morning. I will show that in the next class, and we'll understand this a little more. Hopefully a little more better. So let's take a look at this 5-minute video and bring this class. This is Vishnu. Behind these walls is Dakshinamurti, the main statue. Amazing sculpture, amazing architecture. Brahma, creative energy. This is Chandikeshwara. Chandikeshwara is an aspect of Shiva who sits in every South Indian Shiva temple. He takes stock of who visits a temple, I believe. So one goes to him and marks their presence. And finally, you have Durga. Durga is the amazing creation itself. The entire creation and all its glory is in this element of Durga. Shri Durga. That was the banyan tree where we learned the Om in the previous class. There's a Vishnu shrine right in front. Shrine. So when you visit these ancient temples, you don't do any prostrations inside. This is called the Gajastamba. This has the energy of all the deities in it. So you come out and you do a prostration for all the deities. So that's the kind of a tradition that is set up in most of the South Indian temples. This is a little shed that they built for satsangs and devotional time group, where many sages and saints, including the grand Shankaracharya of Kanchi, as he is called the Mahapariva, has come and given a discourse here. Such a beautiful place. Such a beautiful place. So once again, seeking the blessings of the divine, I'll bring this class to an end. See you on Monday. For your homework, practice the Om, contemplate on the Om, feel the energy and the magic of this beautiful syllable, Om. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.